A struggling black laborer, Marcus never imagined that a single act of kindness would change his life forever. He feels an unexplainable connection when he rescues a wealthy white woman, Victoria, from a dangerous situation. But as secrets unravel and hidden truths come to light, Marcus learns a shocking revelation. Victoria is the mother who abandoned him decades ago. Torn between anger, pain, and love, he must decide if he can forgive her or let the past define his future. The journey of a lifetime begins with a single moment of compassion. Will Marcus embrace the truth, or will the wounds of the past be too deep to heal? Marcus wiped the sweat from his brow, his rough hands aching from a long day's labor. The construction site was his second home, where he poured his strength into every brick and nail. It wasn't the life he had dreamed of, but the only life he knew. Growing up in foster care, he had no memories of his real family, just the vague, haunting absence of a mother he had never met. Marcus packed his tools and started his long walk home as the sun dipped behind the city skyline. The streets were alive with people rushing to their warm, comfortable lives. He envied them, but he had learned to accept his place in the world. That's when he saw her. A well-dressed white woman, likely in her 50s, struggled to fix a flat tire on the side of the road. Her manicured hands trembled as she tried to loosen the lug nuts, her frustration evident. The expensive car and tailored coat told Marcus she came from a world he would never belong to. For a moment, he considered walking away. People like her never noticed men like him, just another faceless worker in a city that didn't care. But something inside him wouldn't let him leave. "Ma'am, do you need some help?" he asked cautiously. She looked up, her blue eyes scanning him warily. Years of prejudice had trained her to be cautious, but desperation overpowered hesitation, and she nodded. Marcus knelt beside the car, his calloused hands working quickly. "This won't take long," he said, smiling. As he worked, she watched him closely. "You're very kind," she murmured, her voice tinged with gratitude. And something else, a strange sadness. Marcus shrugged. "Just doing what I can." When he finished, she reached into her purse, pulling out a crisp $100 bill. "Here, take this, I insist." He hesitated, then shook his head. "No need, ma'am, just be safe." As he turned to leave, she called out, "Wait!" "What's your name?" "Marcus," he replied over his shoulder. She stared at him for a long moment, her face pale, her hands trembling. And then, just before he disappeared into the night, she whispered, "Marcus!" Victoria stood frozen, the name lingering on her lips as the man disappeared into the city streets. Marcus. The name alone sent a shiver down her spine, dragging her deep into memories she had buried for decades. Could it be? No, it wasn't possible. The boy she had lost, given away, would be a man now, but this man, he had his eyes. She forced herself to breathe, gripping the steering wheel tightly. It had to be a coincidence. Yet, as she sat in her luxury car, staring at where he had stood, a deep unease settled in her chest. Meanwhile, Marcus walked briskly through the dimly lit streets, shaking off the odd encounter. Something about the woman's reaction unsettled him. The way she had stared at him, the way she had whispered his name. It was as if she knew him. But that was impossible. He had no family, no past. By the time he reached his small apartment, he was exhausted. He kicked off his boots and collapsed onto the couch, staring at the cracked ceiling. His mind replayed the moment repeatedly, but sleep eventually took him. Across town, Victoria wasn't so lucky. Sleep evaded her as she sat in her study, a glass of wine untouched beside her. She opened an old wooden box she had kept hidden for years. Inside were documents, faded photographs, and a hospital bracelet with a single name: Marcus. Her heart pounded. Could it be him? She had spent years pretending she had made the right choice. She had convinced herself that giving him up was necessary and that she couldn't raise him. But now, Staring at the picture of the tiny baby she had abandoned, she felt sick with regret. She had to find him. The following day, Marcus was back at the construction site, hammering nails into wood, trying to shake the strange feeling in his gut. He had never believed in fate, but the woman's reaction had rattled him. Then, during his lunch break, he noticed a black car pull up near the site. The door opened, and she stepped out. Victoria dressed elegantly, but with uncertainty in her eyes. Workers around him paused, confused by the presence of a woman who didn't belong in this part of town. Marcus tensed. She approached slowly. "Marcus," she said softly. He swallowed. "What are you doing here?" She hesitated, then said the words that changed everything. I think I might be your mother." Marcus stood still, her words hitting him like a wrecking ball. "I might be your mother." The world around him blurred. The noise of the construction site, the chatter of workers, all of it faded into a deafening silence. His jaw tightened as he let out a dry laugh. "You think?" His voice was sharp, laced with disbelief. "Lady, you don't just think you're someone's mother. You either are, or you're not." Victoria flinched at his cold response, but she couldn't blame him. I don't know how to say this," she stammered, searching for words. "But I need to talk to you. Please." Marcus clenched his fists. His whole life, he had wondered why his mother had given him away. Why was he left to grow up in the system, shuffled from one foster home to another? Now this woman, a wealthy white woman, was claiming to be her? He shook his head. "I don't have time for this." Victoria took a step closer, her blue eyes pleading. "Marcus, just give me a chance to explain. Please." He exhaled sharply, his body tense with anger and confusion. Against his better judgment, he jerked his head toward the nearby diner. 5 minutes, that's all you get." Victoria nodded, relieved, and followed him. Inside the diner, they sat across each other, the tension thick between them. Marcus crossed his arms. "Talk." Victoria swallowed hard. 30 years ago, I was young and scared. I made a terrible mistake." Her voice trembled. "I gave you up for adoption." Marcus's expression darkened. "You mean you abandoned me?" Tears welled in Victoria's eyes, but she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "I did. And I have regretted it every single day." Marcus scoffed, leaning back. "You regretted it? Is that why you lived in a mansion while I bounced from one foster home to another? While I grew up never knowing where I belonged?" Victoria's lips quivered. "I didn't have a choice." Marcus slammed his fist on the table. "Everyone has a choice." "You had a choice, and you chose to leave me." His voice cracked, years of buried pain surfacing. The diner fell silent, customers glancing their way. Victoria wiped her tears. "I was young, Marcus. I was from a family that would have disowned me for having a child with a black man. My parents forced me to give you up, and I was too weak to fight them." Marcus's heart pounded. He had expected excuses, but not this. She continued, voice shaking. "I spent years looking for you, but the system made it impossible. I thought I'd never see you again. And then, last night, it was fate." Marcus stared at her, his emotions a whirlwind. Fate? Or is it just another cruel trick of life? Marcus sat there, fists clenched, heart pounding. He had spent years convincing himself that his mother had never wanted him, that she had abandoned him without a second thought. But now, here she was, sitting across from him, claiming she had been forced, claiming she had searched for him. He didn't know what to believe. "You really expect me to just accept that?" he asked, his voice low but filled with restrained anger. "That you had no choice?" Victoria's eyes glistened with tears. "Marcus, I know I failed you. I should have fought for you. I should have run away. I should have done something, anything. But I didn't." Her voice broke. "And I hate myself for it." Marcus exhaled sharply, shaking his head. Hate yourself all you want, but that doesn't change what happened. Do you have any idea what it was like? Being tossed around the system, never having a real home? His voice wavered, raw with emotion. Do you know what it's like to wonder every single night why you weren't good enough for your own mother? Victoria's breath hitched, a silent sob escaping her lips. You were always good enough. It was me who wasn't. Marcus clenched his jaw, gazing toward the window, watching cars pass. A part of him wanted to walk away, to shut her out like she had shut him out all those years ago. But another part of him, one he hated to admit existed, wanted to listen. Victoria reached into her purse with trembling fingers and pulled an old photograph. She slid it across the table. Marcus hesitated before looking down. It was a picture of a young woman, barely out of her teenage years, holding a newborn. Her face was pale, eyes red from crying, but there was something unmistakable in her expression. Love. His throat tightened. Is this me? She nodded. I kept this with me all these years. It's the only thing I had left of you. Marcus felt something stir in his chest, something he wasn't ready to name. He wanted to believe her, but belief meant opening old wounds, and he wasn't sure he could survive that again. Victoria wiped her tears. I don't expect you to forgive me, Marcus. I just wanted you to know the truth. Marcus exhaled deeply. And what do you want now? You found me. What happens next? She hesitated. That's up to you. Marcus looked into her eyes, searching for lies, but all he saw was regret and longing. He had spent his whole life waiting for answers. Now that he had them, what was he supposed to do? Marcus stared at the photograph, his hands trembling slightly. It was proof that she had once held him, once cared. But was that enough? Could a single picture erase the years of loneliness, the nights he had cried himself to sleep, the pain of never belonging? He slid the photograph back across the table. I don't know what you expect from me, he muttered. You say you regret it, but regret doesn't change the past. Victoria swallowed hard, nodding. I know. She took a shaky breath. I just want a chance to know you, to make things right. Marcus let out a bitter laugh. Make things right? You think we can just have some happy reunion and forget everything? His voice was thick with emotion. That's not how life works. Victoria's face fell, but she didn't look away. I don't expect you to forget, Marcus. I don't even expect you to forgive me. Her voice cracked. I just want to be in your life if you'll let me. Marcus clenched his jaw. Every instinct told him to shut her out, to walk away before he got hurt again. But another part of him, one he had buried deep, ached for something he had never had. A mother. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. I don't know, he admitted. I don't even know you. Victoria's eyes flickered with hope. Then let me change that. Marcus hesitated, his heart warring with his mind. He had spent his life surviving, never letting anyone get too close. Letting her in meant risking everything. After a long silence, he finally spoke. I need time. Victoria nodded quickly. Of course. Take all the time you need. Marcus stood, tossing some money on the table for his coffee. I have to get back to work. Victoria's expression was unreadable, a mix of hope and fear. Will I see you again? He paused, then sighed. Maybe. Then he walked out, leaving Victoria sitting there, staring at the photograph of the baby she had lost, praying that this time she wouldn't lose him again. Marcus walked back to the construction site, his mind a tangled mess. The steady rhythm of hammering and the distant hum of machinery usually helped him focus. Still, today, nothing could silence the storm inside him. His mother. For years, he had convinced himself she had never wanted him and tossed him away like an unwanted burden. But now she stood before him, flesh and blood, asking for a second chance. Yo, Marcus! His coworker Jake called out. You good, man? You've been zoning out all day. Marcus forced a nod. Yeah, just tired. Jake smirked. Long night? Marcus let out a dry chuckle. Something like that. But inside, he was anything but delicate. He worked through the day on autopilot, his body going through the motions while his mind replayed every word Victoria had said. By the time his shift ended, the sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Walking home, he found himself slowing down near a small park. Children laughed as they played on the swings, their parents watching from the benches. He swallowed hard, wondering what it would have been like to grow up with someone looking out for him. Would his life have been different? Would he have been different? Before he could stop himself, he pulled out his phone. His fingers hovered over the screen for a long moment before he finally tapped the number on the card Victoria had slipped into his pocket. She answered on the first ring. Marcus! He exhaled sharply. Yeah, it's me. A pause. Then, hope bloomed in her voice. I'm so glad you called. Marcus hesitated. I don't know why I did. You don't have to know, she said gently. You don't have to decide anything right now. I just want to talk. Maybe meet again? Marcus leaned against a lamppost, staring at the city lights flickering to life. He wasn't sure he was ready, but something inside told him he couldn't walk away. All right, he said finally. One more time. Victoria's breath hitched. Thank you. As he hung up, Marcus felt a strange sensation settle in his chest. Something unfamiliar. Hope. Marcus sat at the small cafe, his fingers tapping anxiously against the table. He had no idea why he was here. He had told himself over and over that he didn't need her, that he had survived just fine without her. But now, as he waited, a nervous energy filled his chest. The door opened, and Victoria stepped in. She spotted him immediately, her expression a mix of relief and cautious hope. Marcus, she said softly as she sat across from him. He nodded, studying her face. Now that he looked, he could see the faint traces of himself in her, the shape of her nose, the curve of her lips. It was unsettling. They sat in silence for a moment before Victoria spoke. I know I can't undo the past. I know I don't deserve anything from you. Marcus clenched his jaw. Then why are you here? She took a deep breath. Because I want to know you. Not because I expect you to forgive me, but because I want to be whatever you'll allow me to be in your life. He let out a bitter laugh. And what if I don't want that? Victoria swallowed hard, pain flashing in her eyes. Then I'll respect that. She hesitated. But before you decide, can I tell you something? Marcus sighed. Go ahead. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. This was the last letter I wrote to you, she said, sliding it across the table. I wrote one every year on your birthday. I never knew where to send them, but I never stopped writing. Marcus hesitated, then slowly unfolded the paper. The handwriting was shaky, but filled with emotion. Dear Marcus, happy birthday, my son. I don't know where you are or if you'll ever read this, but I want you to know I love you. I loved you when I held you in my arms, and I've never stopped. I pray that you are safe, loved, and happy wherever you are. And I hope that one day, if fate allows, you will find me, and I will tell you all this in person. Marcus swallowed hard, his vision blurring. His whole life, he had believed he was unwanted. But this changed everything. He looked up at Victoria, who was watching him with tear-filled eyes. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. You don't have to, she whispered. We'll figure it out together. For the first time, Marcus didn't feel like a lost boy searching for something he could never have. Maybe he had found it, and maybe he was ready to take the first step. Enjoyed this story? Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales. Let's spread the message of hope and unity together. Thanks, and take care.